Hi, and welcome to Female Founderhood, a podcast for female entrepreneurs who's willing to show us behind the scenes, the blood, sweat, and tears. Why? Because the success stories we see have been giving us FOMO energy. Whereas when we're in the trenches, we want to hear that we're not alone, that we're not stupid, that we're not crazy. Well, we probably are crazy, but here I am. I'm your host, Rebecca Leppard. I founded Upgrading Women, a marketing agency that is by and for women. But my job today is to ask the questions that we normally would be too shy to ask. Or is it because I'm Indonesian in England? Or full of reserved people. But today I'm going to have a conversation with Sara Osterholzer. So she's half German, so she's going to be super transparent with me, or uber transparent. Hi, Sara.
Hi, Rebecca. And yeah, I'm really glad to be part of this conversation with you.
Yes. So before we dive in, what did you want to be when you grew up? Because as children of, our generation, we didn't have entrepreneurship in the radar, right? How about you?
Yeah. Interestingly, when I was really young, I wanted to be a policewoman. And I remember deciding I didn't want to be that anymore because in the UK, the men and women have different hats, and the women's ones are pretty atrocious. And I was like, I don't think I really want to be wearing that hat all the time. So I decided not to go down that route. And
Like
then more seriously, maybe when I was, that like they just have really weird pointy ones, whereas the men's just look more normal.
Okay, this is important. A woman not going into a certain career because of fashion reason. Love that.
Yeah. But yeah, when I was at kind of more late teens, I was really interested in photography, which I still am. And my first job was supporting a wedding photographer, and I had always kind of thought that was going to be my career path until I actually had some work experience. After a couple of years working there, I realized it was going to be quite a hard slog to make a living out of something you're really, really passionate about. Mm-hmm. So I think I then just thought, I'm going to park that, enjoy that, and then I'm going to just go into studying business, because whatever I did would be working in a business. I didn't really know what I wanted to do by the time I kind of got to that level. Yeah. So I just decided that would be a good path, and yeah. So what didn't think I'd be starting up businesses.
But you did study international business, right? So what
I did, yeah. So I went to... Well, interestingly, again, I am in the UK. We have a system where you do your A levels if you want to go into higher education, and I picked 4. And one of the 4, they couldn't fit into my schedule. It just had a clash. So I remember the first day going into A levels, and they were like, okay, you can't do that anymore. You have to choose between maths, physics, or business. And I was like, well, I'm not very good at maths, don't really enjoy physics, so I probably do business. So I actually just got it put on my syllabus, and then I just started enjoying it. I thought, this is actually quite interesting, because with business, there's quite a lot of concepts, but there's not always particularly a right answer. It's a lot of problem solving. So trying this, thinking about this. And I think I actually just enjoyed the process of thinking about things. And I thought, oh, okay, actually, this could be quite interesting, probably quite useful to do it at university. So really didn't have much of a plan at all, Rebecca.
And what was your upbringing like your home life? Did your parents have a lot of influence with like how or what your studies are and your first career? How was it like?
Yeah, so I think on reflection, which I hadn't really thought about until more recently, my dad has always been self-employed. He works in the film industry as a carpenter, and my mum was a dog walker, so she was self-employed. She kind of created that opportunity so that she could still spend time with us as kids when we're on holidays, that kind of thing, which I hadn't really thought about. So actually neither of my parents worked in the corporate world, so I think that option never really was something that interested me. I also think I was the kind of kid that was just quite studious. I quite liked learning. The education system just fit how my brain function. So I was just quite interested in it. And I think I've always been quite driven and ambitious. So I just set my goals to try get, do well in everything, really. So I think they were very encouraging. They did worked really hard actually to get me and my sisters into private education here in the UK as well towards the end of our education. So they worked hard to give us as many opportunities as they could to open up doors for us.
Yeah.
But I think I just kind of followed my own education path because it was quite interesting to me.
Oh, interesting. I want to double click because it's top of my mind. My eldest is going to go secondary school next year. So I have now determination to send him to a grammar school, which obviously in the UK, it's not very common for parents to send their kids to a private school. But in Asia, it's super duper common. Like it's not even a fancy privileged thing. Yes, of course, it's for middle class mom, but it's not something that like, ooh, private school. So now, how did you then, when you went to private school, which is definitely very, very exclusive in this context, did you feel like, oh, definitely this did give me a leg up one way or another?
That's an interesting, and I've debated this a lot with a lot of people, including my partner as well, who didn't go down the same educational route, and in just lots of different conversations. And I think interesting. I'm also reading a book which I can't now remember what it's called, but I will share it with you afterward. That looks at the role that DNA actually plays in terms of things like I'll say the word studious, but there is an element of like some people, the way that they see the world and how their brain takes in information, the education system suits them really well.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, it really doesn't. So for me, education and the education system, I think, is actually quite broken and outdated, and our societal pressures we put on kids to all fit the same box doesn't make any sense. So where I've kind of landed with it is that I think I have always been someone who fits a quite good framework in terms of how the education system is built now. So I think I went in ready to absorb and take in. I think if you put someone else who's completely different, just because they're in that space doesn't mean that they would have got as much out of it as someone else, right? I do also think that there's potentially a kind of theme or energy in me, which is I can achieve anything, that I do sometimes realize not a lot of people always have. And I do wonder if that equated to be in the space where someone is telling you all the time, you can do whatever you want, you've just got to try and all that kind of stuff. And but again, that could have just been naturally in me before going to education, right? So I think like the education is a really, really hard one.
Yeah, nurture nature.
Exactly. It's nature, exactly that kind of debate, right?
Yes, absolutely. Because I went to a grammar school, my husband didn't, but his dad did. And so we were like, the dinner table conversation is very interesting because, well, success is not determined by da-da-da-da-da. But then at the same time, as you quite rightly pointed out, that of course, different environment will mean differently for different type of person. Someone who's studious, someone who's, I guess, alpha, like you and me, will then nourish. Whereas if someone is not in that category, the education system will absolutely crush them. Right?
Yeah. And I think you have to treat each person uniquely in that sense.
Exactly.
Absolutely. I think I know I haven't got kids, but I think my mindset is when I do is what do they uniquely need as an individual? How can you nurture them and what environments suit them as well? And I think as we're going along, there are becoming, different education channels now and opportunities for that. And actually we talk a lot about it also in the work setting of like, I remember when I started in the world of work, like I'd put so much pressure on getting this degree and not a single person asked me for it. And in fact, in our hiring process now, we don't even look at education as an indicator whether someone is going to be able to do good in certain roles that we're looking for either. And I think that mentality is shifting, of taking the pressure off of like, you've got to do, go to private education and university means that you're going to be more successful. Like, yeah, the science behind it is actually proving that it isn't actually about the nurture bit. Actually, the nature bit is a much bigger indicator of where someone's going to be and what they're going to be doing based on who they are actually.
Yeah. Plus, now that people are more aware with neurodiversity,
yes,
now we are getting more and more granular in our self-awareness.
Yes.
That, okay.
Absolutely.
Like, you can be born into the same family, but of course we've seen since the beginning of time, since Adam and Eve,
yeah.
every kid in the same family, they have different interests, they have different pace.
That's it.
And so on. So, and of course, I forgot to read your bio. So I have a context of who you are, but the listeners, listen, Sara is an impact entrepreneur. And she is also a startup mentor. And she's been in the world of startup for nearly a decade. Oh gosh, you started early. So she has been part of the founding team of 4 startups, designed and delivered an accelerator program, organized hundreds of businesses, support and networking event series. And she started up 2 of her own businesses, the Good Business Club, which we're going to discuss, and most recently, Second Voice Pro. I want to double click on that as well later. But how did you...
Fantastic.
So you started as employees, right? And when and how did you then decide to take the plunge into owning your own business?
It's interesting. Yeah, with everything, you'll see a theme in my life where things just happen and I kind of run with it. So the first 5 years in that 10-year kind of startup experience was actually as employee number 1, working really closely with a founder, going, okay, I think I realized that I was quite, a lot of my strengths were in taking big like visions and breaking them down and putting structure and process and system. So unsurprisingly now I'm an ops director. Like, I think that's talking about neurodiversity. I think that's my autistic traits. I've now realized is that's how I see things, and I can operate really nicely in that. So I learned a heck of a lot working with a founder, and in that role you just juggle everything, right? From kind of outreach, marketing, event coordination, client success, like exactly all of it, right? So I learned a lot, and then I got really interested in, okay, how can we actually support entrepreneurs to do a better job in those first years? Because actually everything I'd learned at university was much more around theory and frameworks rather than the reality of challenges of just running a business. So I moved more into business support, and I was part of an organization, which is where I kind of stood into more of a design of programs, event series, really trying to bring real conversations to life. So let's come into a room and not just pretend everything's going fine, and actually be like, this is something that I'm really struggling with, and seeing how we could then design programs where we could be a couple of steps ahead and actually support people on that journey. And it was in that organization, it was more or less 80% sustained on external funding, and a big chunk of funding got pulled. And unfortunately, the leadership team didn't let anyone know until 24 hours before we had to stop trading. So we were all made redundant. There's a couple of things. Part of it was like what we had been creating felt really powerful to me. There also had been a lot of things that I would have wanted to do differently, but I wasn't in that kind of position to make those sort of changes. I did suggest a lot of things all the time. And so there's a moment where myself and one of my colleagues just looked at each other and were like, we've got to do something. And that's where the Good Business Club started. Really, I just thought, let's give it six months, let's test it out. If it doesn't work out, I'll go find another job. And yeah, we're 5 years down the line, and I've now set up another business. So it wasn't a like intentional decision. I was quite surprised myself. I'd always thought if I ever started a business, it would be when I'm like in my 50s. So I was 28 when I set up the club, and it just opportunity presented itself. I thought I'd give it a go, and it was a whole different experience compared to telling and supporting other people how to do it. Doing it yourself was just the biggest personal development journey I've been on.
Yeah, of course. So tell us about that first 6 months, the make or break, the like, oh my God, I have to figure this thing out. How was
Yeah,
it?
I think for me, one of the biggest things I experienced was a lot of pressure I put on myself. So, like I said, I'd kind of started placing myself as this specialist, particularly with startups and helping other people start up businesses. So suddenly I was in this position where I was like, I've been helping everyone else do this. Now I've got to do it myself. I've probably got to get this right. So I definitely went into those first 6 months of only tell people all the good stuff, like and just try to hold all of it on myself and just do a really good job. So there were things strategically I knew was good to do, like, you know, just increase your reach, the visibility, build that brand. And so in that way things went well. But I think I also then just had a lot of stuff that probably would have been easier if I had just talked to someone else about it, soundboarded ideas, or got other people's perspectives. So I think the first couple of years in that sense also was quite intense because I didn't do a lot of sharing, even though that was what I was trying to create for other people. Somehow I was like, oh, I have to have my stuff together, you know, like people can't figure out that I don't know what I'm doing. Otherwise, why am I setting this up for other people? So that took me a while to for myself realize I was doing that, and then the opportunity to do the opposite. And I feel like now that for the first business was the biggest lesson I really learned.
Like you should have been more open and vulnerable and seeing vulnerability not as weakness, but as opportunity for growth. And I think when you're being vulnerable, the right people will react positively. Don't you think?
Absolutely. And that's my experience now. And I realize it is hard to tell someone that who was where I was before, but I had some really fantastic people around me who did encourage me to do that, including a friend who does a podcast. And I had a lot of mental health challenges in my early 20s that I didn't talk to anyone about. And I kind of shared it to her, and she said, oh, this would be amazing if you were open to sharing it on the podcast. And I was like, hell no, why would I do that? Everyone would suddenly know that I'm super weak and all that stuff that happens, right? And she was great at encouraging me, and I took that step. And I remember when she shared it, just suddenly being like, what am I doing? But I was just so moved by what came back. And I realized who I was to a lot of people was very unrelatable, because my life to a lot of people and the perception I was giving out was everything's great all the time and it's all like happy and all of this, and that isn't reality. And therefore people were like, well, that's not my life, I can't relate to that. So actually I didn't have a lot of connection. And since being more vulnerable and just being authentic actually is how I feel about it now, it's just being real, I find I can build relationships so much more quickly and have really solid ones as well that really stick with you for a long time. So that was a huge journey to go on personally. And but it's both as an individual and like personally it's been great, but also for the business and what you're able to then do in terms of bringing other people and expertise in for the business. I could get it so much further than trying to figure that stuff on my own.
Absolutely. And so now you've been 5 years down the road, basically organizing a club of people like you and me in the trenches, starting up, failing, and going back up again. And I cannot remember who said this, but definitely people who start a business are unreasonable people. As in,
I love that.
if we are being reasonable, why would we take on this risk, right?
Absolutely.
So, like, my husband is a 9 to 5er all his life.
Yeah.
So he sees me working 9 to 9, and even my son was asking me, I thought you're the boss of your company. Why are you not just relaxing?
Yeah.
So we're wired differently. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And of course, and you cannot say one is better than the other. You need both type of people. So and now touching on the subject of mental health, and I also remember just a few days ago, I was meeting up with clients, and they're one of my nicest people that I work with, and I was open to them about my mental health struggles, not in a way, not, but more like it's just a part of the conversation, because I didn't want to make it a big deal, like, hi, I have an announcement to make. No, but it's like, oh yeah,
Yes.
I have this thought, and I was so anxious. I was this. I had medical.
Yeah.
I took this type of medication and it didn't work. I so wanted that to be just a normal conversation, not like a bang, bang, bang.
Yeah.
Like I record a video where I look super sad and crying in front of camera, because I don't think that
Yeah.
is a genuine vulnerability either. So what's been your experience now that you're hanging out with equally unreasonable people?
Yeah, I honestly, I love that so much, because it also just makes so much more like sense when you talk about it unreasonable. I think most things in my life literally is that. So I think it is a certain kind of person who gets
Yeah.
attracted to it. But I think I can really resonate that, particularly that conversation around mental health. So what I realized for a long time, I had a lot of shame that I was carrying around my own experience with it. And on reflection, it was because like I said, in life, people don't talk about it a lot. I think things again are shifting a lot, which I'm always encouraging. So now I just try to talk about it as openly as possible. But I wasn't looking out at the world and going, oh yeah, okay, so here are some confident, powerful women. Like none of them were talking about mental health issues. So I was like,
No.
oh my gosh, if I've got challenges with my mental health, how am I going to be, where I want to get to? So
Yes.
it was only when I started again being a bit brave and sharing with a couple of people, and they would open up and be like, oh yeah, I felt like that my whole life, and you suddenly realize, wow, this is actually really normal, or at least everyone who I surround myself with, it seems really normal. And as it started normalizing in my own world, I realized that was that was the only thing. The bridge was conversation, and it wasn't that people weren't experiencing these things, it's that no one's talking about it. And it is that normalization. Like I said, it's not about let's be all doom and gloom and talk about how things are really terrifying and whatever it is. But it which is actually more powerful if you can normalize it. It doesn't have that sting and the power anymore. It's just oh, things are either tough right now or they're not tough, and that's just life. Like, where are you in the journey right now? Are you rolling high? Are you down on a roller coaster? Like, let's just normalize that this is life, rather than trying to aim to be up here all the time, because that's unrealistic. So I think that is why I talk about it as much as I can now as well, to normalize that you can be a really successful woman, as I like to think that I am, and still be challenged with things like anxiety. Do you mean, like, that is just being a human being, actually?
That's the thing. That's what I don't know if you remember this, maybe 10, 15 years ago, people don't even talk about how PMS would affect them on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
But PMS is a day-to-day life. It's not.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And for me, these days, even before talking about mental health issues, I want us to even like, oh, I'm on my period. Like, to talk about it.
Yeah.
Sort of like, oh, I'm hungry, I want to have lunch. I want that in the same tone.
Yeah.
Because the cycle of you being hungry, wanting lunch, it's also biology.
It's exactly the same naturally, for sure. Yeah.
And part of that cycle is also you being slightly psychotic right? When you're PMS.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we want, because again, mental health is now more and more, I realize, especially recently, from my own experience, I realize mental issues is not uh, a circumstantial thing. It's biology. It's biology.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I have, so early this year, I felt so depressed during my best month of business. And my
Yeah.
family was all healthy. Everything was, so circumstantially, it was perfect.
Yes.
But I couldn't help. And this is the key where people say, because we need probably a different word for depression, because sometimes when we say, oh, that's depressing, it's the circumstances are depressing, right? But the actual thing that is happening in your biology, that is not something you can help, right?
Yeah.
And this is
And I think
exactly
what you said a lot earlier on, I think is really powerful. What you said about we are getting more granular. I think that's particularly with language. That's part of the journey as well, right? Is we've got language at the moment for certain situations, and as we discover more, we're able to split that up and be able to describe things better. Because I think the other reality is there's some people who don't get it because they've never experienced it. So how can we in conversation be on the same page? And you're right, language is a really powerful step in that journey. As we get more granular about things, we'll discover more and be able to better communicate that.
Yeah, because the phrase like, oh, no wonder you're depressed, or no wonder she's depressed, it's actually two different things. Because I guess what you're saying is like, no wonder she's sad because the situation is sad. You know, oh, she's grieving, of course she's sad. But what happens when everything is well and dandy, sunshine and rainbows, and you don't feel that unicorn? So that is the thing. I think whoever that invents words, please, I need to order a new word for this, because we need to differentiate these two.
Yes, for sure.
One is conditional, one is a condition, right? That you cannot snap out of it. You cannot shop your way out of it. Remember those terms, retail therapy? Right? And that's why people should, if we can differentiate those two, I think there's a lot of practical solution that can be offered. For example, people think, oh, when someone is depressed, they tend to go to alcohol, drugs, etc. But that's actually different, absolutely different game. It's a different ball game. And self-medicating, all of these, because how can you find a solution if you cannot name the problem?
And it's interesting, actually, also, before we hit live, we're talking about diversity, and I think that's a really interesting element to this as well, because if you're in the same bubble with same sort of people, life only looks a certain way. And being able to look at things other ways, a first step to then understand how are things different for different people as well. I think you asked earlier as well about what's it like being around unreasonable people, and for me, the beauty of being even part of my own club is the diversity. We've got a bunch of people from all sorts of different life experiences, different drivers, different passions, different experience in just general of business as well, right? And being in a space where you can have such different perspectives all contributing to each other is absolutely, for me, it's the same with life as it is in business. The more options, the more ways you can think and see things, the more likely you can choose a path that feels more, right for you, or
Yes.
more thought through and all that kind of stuff, right? You get more perspective. You're always going to make a better decision. Like that's very much how I've always lived my life. So that for me, diversity piece, and I know again that's a big theme that seems to be coming up a lot more, particularly in bigger organizations. Yes. But I think already in small businesses, entrepreneurs, those unreasonable people normally are quite unique, and they can come together in quite a powerful way to support themselves as well as other people, and therefore the businesses, and therefore the world, right, in the context of the club I've got as well.
I think that should be the title of my book, like Unreasonable Women.
I love that. You should, genuinely. That really resonated. So
right?
I've got my vote for it.
So okay, first of all, I will have to put on my diary to sign up for thegoodbusinessclub.com. So
join us.
I want to be there with fellow unreasonable people. But
love that.
Yes. And my next question would be, so you co-founded this. Who's the other half?
Of the club?
Of the founder of the Good Business Club. Yeah.
Yeah. So the other founder is a woman called Ruth Anslow, who you should also have a conversation with, Rebecca, because you'll have a great time with her. But she over 10 years ago actually set up an ethical supermarket, and at that time was pretty much cutting edge and trying to do something differently. So she really wanted to prove that you could have like ethical food supply chain that looked after local suppliers, paid good money, but also be able to keep prices accessible and bring good food to cities. Like that's very much wanting to really break the supermarket model. So our paths have crossed a couple of times, and she happened to have joined the business that I was working in when it closed, probably like 3 months before it happened. So we had been working quite closely in that moment, but also knew each other quite well. So she is always a big ambassador of this. She has the same vision that I've always had, where a future not even that distant anymore, where all businesses are considering people and planet alongside how they're running operationally, right? So she has been an incredible spokesperson and enrolling people in, like, this is where the vision is that we're going on. If you want support or want to be part of that vision, come join us and let's support each other as well. She's a fantastic person, worth the conversation with.
100%. You should link me up with her. But did you?
I will.
And not did. What advice would you have for those who are solopreneurs considering whether they need or want a co-founder or to bring in a business partner? How do you determine? Because co-founderhood is not for everybody as well, right? How do you determine whether or not to start something alone or with a co-founder? And the second advice I need from you is, how do you then vet whether or not, because you can be good friends, you can be good, partner, you can be husband and wife, but could you be co-founders, right? So
Oh, what a great conversation. I love that. So I will I'll first lay down that for both my businesses, my co-founders have just presented themselves, right? So I've never been in a position where I've made a strategic decision to go out and find someone. So I will give my perspective based on what I think, but I can't say that I've done it successfully, right? So but I think what is really important, because I've got two, so I can actually compare, I think there are some similarities in any relationship that I think is really important with a co-founder. One is trust, and two is communication. So what I think is very beautiful about both my relationships is that although I am similar in terms of vision, ambition, and the same values with both my co-founders, I'm actually also very different to them, right? And for me, that's a huge benefit in terms of experience, skill set, and also, like I said, this perspective thing. How do you see the world? How do you operate? If you've got two people are very different, that's amazing for the business as well, right? So, but what that also really heightens is the need for, again, trust and communication. So if you don't trust someone, you're probably not going to communicate with them. And then you'll probably find yourself in a whole world of problems, as you would in any relationship, right? If you haven't got communication, challenges are just going to present themselves. And if you trust someone and you're on the same page and have that ability to communicate consistently, you can always work around challenges, right? So I think if I was thinking about I guess intentionally going to find a co-founder, I'd be looking at what is it that I want to achieve, and what have I not got that the business would need to achieve that. So you might want to break that down into skill sets. So I said, I know that I'm an ops person, which is fantastic, but I need to work with a visionary, because I will otherwise just get stuck into how can we make the day-to-day absolutely fantastic, but won't be growing the business further and innovating. So I work really well with a visionary, which both my co-founders are. They've got big pictures, and I then take that and start breaking it down and making it happen. So to understand how you operate and how you work is really important. There might also be certain experiences in certain industries that you haven't got experience in. So if you had told me two years ago that I'd be setting up a sales business, I would have probably said you were crazy, because I'm not a salesperson. So how can I run a sales business? But my co-founder has been in 25 years in sales, and so that wouldn't have worked otherwise. You see, so if you've got a certain industry or expertise area that you really need in the business, you want to be looking at how you can bring that in. And then also someone who has got a network, that sort of thing, is also worthwhile thinking about. Okay, how are we going to leverage what we've both got to bring to the table to make it happen? And ultimately, you've got to have the same sort of the vision, values, and drive is key, right? Like you should know what you're trying to create, and the first conversation with anyone is, what's important to you, what would you like to create and be part of, and you have to have that same North Star and values in the way you want to do business as well, right? I think that's important, and I talked that with both my co-founders of this is how I want to do business, is what's important to me, is what I don't want to do, and you want to know that right at the front, so you can make a decision whether you're going to, because otherwise you will just clash in decisions as you go, because you'll just look at it differently, so you're not going to get where you want to get to. So I think it's important knowing what you're bringing to the table in terms of what the business needs, what else you need, and take your time. Like, go out, intentionally meet people, have conversations, but have conversations like just as a human being, and see where they lead. Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't have to even be, I'm thinking about you being a co-founder. It could just be like, this person's really interesting, I'm just gonna go and talk to them a bit more, keep picking their brains and see where organically it goes. But do go out there and do that. Don't just sit and hope that someone's going to post on LinkedIn, I'm looking for a co-founder. Like, it's not going to happen that way. So be intentional about it, but also don't be too mechanical, which is where I can always go down that path. So just let it, see where it comes organically as well. My co-founder for this second business, so he joined the club. He helped with some of my own sales stuff in that business. We just became really good friends. We were just meeting up for like coffees. We'd talk about different ideas. I'd sometimes pick his brain on sales stuff or where I want to go. And he had all these different ideas, and it organically came to the point where he was like, I've got this idea and I can't make it happen without someone who's organized. Do you want to join me and go on this journey with me? So that was 2 years of building that relationship without intentionally thinking it was going to lead to that, so I'm under the impression that you kind of just have to see where things go. You can't be too mechanical with trying to find someone, but I haven't got any reason why. There might be some great places you can go to be connected to a co-founder. I'm not sure.
Yes, there are now co-founders matching communities and stuff like that, which I think, same like Tinder. I mean,
got it.
Not be too mechanical in that. Okay, I want at least 6 foot tall and went to Harvard.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you have to put yourself out there. You have to keep an open mind. Um, and at the same time, co-foundership can be in various different format, isn't it? Like, what's the percentage
Yeah.
of ownership and who
And just roles as well. So
yeah.
yeah, with my first co-founder, Ruth, so she was running the supermarket at the same time. So she said, look, I can't give you time in terms of operationally running things, but I can give you as an individual time if you want to soundboard things, get advice, all that kind of stuff. So the first year of the club, I carved out time for us a lot to go, okay, let's get this all on a whiteboard. And it was a lot of the visioning and designing, right, of them making it come to life. Now Ruth and I'll probably pick her brains once a year. If there's opportunities to get her to a speaking event and stuff, she'll go to that, but it's become a lot less in that sense. So she is has been more of a mentor and an advisor to me and someone who represents the business, right? Whereas this other business is complete opposite. We're very much splitting the day to day. He's the CEO, so he's leading. So you have to get that clarity also of like, what is it that you need as an individual if you're looking for a co-founder? How does that look? And then all the mechanics of the actual legalities around it too, of course.
Yes, and now that was about to be my next question. Like, I've been married for I think 11 years. I can't even remember. And
Wow.
I had, and unconventionally to my culture and my country, I built a prenup before my wedding. And to a point, I was interviewed by this massive podcast called Girls That Invest about my decision to make a prenup. And we're not at all like celebrities or heir and heiress of whatever.
Yeah.
We're just normal people going into a marriage, and we had a prenup. And for me, that's the one reasonable thing to do. But a lot of people put a lot of emotion onto anything that is on paper, which is crazy.
Yes.
So how do you bridge that conversation? Especially, the Eastern culture, how it's more of a handshake than an on paper.
Yeah.
What would your advice be for potential business partner, co-founders, etc., or even like angel investor, but that is, maybe it's your sister. So not like exactly like from a VC perspective. How do you bridge that conversation?
Yeah.
To say, look,
so I think I think the thing that's really interesting about this is the trigger of what it normally does for people. You go, oh, well, let's put an agreement in place, and someone suddenly goes, oh, don't trust me, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. It feels like it's going to be an offensive thing to do, right? I think the main thing that I have learned from anything to putting something down on paper in any context is it just forces clarity. So if you can accept that probably what's in your head and my head is different, if we say even let's run a business together, you've got your assumptions, I've got my assumptions. If you don't get it clear on paper, you're very likely get to a point where you're like, oh, but I thought we're going to do this, and you're like, well, no, I thought it was going to look this way. So actually all you're doing in any form, putting something on a piece of paper, is getting clarity that everyone's on the same page. There is an accountability thing, which I think sometimes people, if they're not wanting to commit, there's all that other baggage people sometimes bring of don't want to commit to something and everything else. But from my experience, the clarity piece trumps everything. And I have heard of some really awful stories, particularly with co-founders, particularly people who've known each other very well beforehand. That has been a huge breakdown. And the key thing I've always heard as a theme has always been, I wish we'd got something written down, because for them it normally feels like, because we could have held them to account, but actually what it would have done is meant they had that conversation and got really clear about it at the beginning and could then choose, do you still want to go on the journey together or not? Like, that's all it needs to be. And I think for some reason it's tied up emotionally to a whole bunch of other stuff. But if we can talk more about, let's get clear, It's a bit like
Mm.
saying, let's just write a vision on a board rather than having to be like, let's get it down on paper as an agreement. Like, let's just do that exercise. Um, Ruth and I did an exercise when we first started about values, and we went away, got clear what our own values were, and brought them together and had a conversation. And she said, I want to make sure that we're going to gel working together.
Yeah.
She, I think, thinks similar to me. So I'm like, oh, that's great.
Yeah.
But those things are important. I think most people sidestep them when they start out because it maybe feels like a little bit too much. And then you either learn the hard way or you hear about other stories and you go, okay, actually, maybe it's probably valuable. So I think there's your own journey. But for me, it's the clarity piece is really valuable.
Yeah. And especially, I was triggered to have this conversation with you as well. A, you have multiple co-founders, and B, yesterday I read a title of an article. I didn't read the whole thing, but it says what happens when there's a co-founder breakup, and that's why it reminds me of like a marriage and prenup. Like, of course, you don't get into something with the hope that you're going to get a divorce or a breakup or anything, of course. But situations happen. Like a lot of people sell their businesses because they want to build a family now and they don't want it anymore, or they want to start early, right? So I guess from what I've taken from your advice, the clarity is a powerful word, because it's not about whether or not you trust each other, but it's more about, I cannot read your mind and vice versa.
Exactly.
How about we pour them out, right? And see if everything that we have some overlap, and if there's something that clash, can we sort it out before we decide to move forward, right? I think that
that's
completely, that completely separate the conversation. There's nothing to do with trust, nothing to do with what, like, it's not even like one is vetting the other, right?
Exactly.
It's like, oh, let's pour it out. I cannot read your mind, and vice versa. And we want this to be as powerful as possible. So if we then share similar vision, and then we can build up, it's almost like a design thinking, right? You put it on, create a prototype. If something doesn't feel right, you either iterate it or you toss it out the window. Right?
And then I'm an ops person. Like, my job always is to try and take things that exist and break it down to a way that everyone can understand it. And so for me, everything always comes down to clarity and communication. If there's ever a challenge, it's because someone's not understood it the way the other person's intended. From my experience, that normally is. So if you can build that from the beginning, you'll end up doing that in every conversation rather than jumping to assumptions. But like, let's get clear on this first and then go do it. Or like that, from my experience, is the main thing any discussion is normally that people are on different pages and they just think they're on the same one. And then they're judging why someone's doing something based on what they see. And you're like, they don't see it that way. That's why they're doing it. So we need to then, again, realign its clarity normally all the time.
Now, that is a very good point for me to pivot to talking about sales. So everyone I met, especially women, they always say they hate sales. And at the same time, no sales, no business. Right, Sara?
Yep. 100%.
So in your observation, especially that you do have an outbound sales business, what is it that prevent women from enjoying the sales part of the business?
Yeah. So I sat very much in that category. And I think now, being in a business where I'm running sales, it's not even just a woman thing from my experience. I think sales is, again, like most things, quite outdated, the way that we have it in our head. So sales, what it is today, actually isn't what I was expecting it to be. So when Ben, my co-founder, helped me with my own business and helping skill me up in it, I was preparing myself to be like, how can I be like tougher, more ruthless, and all this stuff. And what he actually taught me was like, this is about relationship building. How can you add value? How can you be generous? How can you give people time? And it's your job just to understand what they need and communicate what you can do in a way that actually they go, oh, that's what I need. And normally, if you haven't got that skill set to do that, what you do more naturally is, here's my thing, like, and people don't understand it, and then you get frustrated why they're not buying it. So for you, it's a horrible experience because you're frustrated. Like, I've got this amazing thing and I know that you're going to value it. Why are you not getting it? And for the receiver, it's, who's this person badgering me with something I don't need, right? So the key thing with sales is, if you're not doing it well, it's not a nice process. A lot of people then go, oh, I don't really like sales. But from my experience, they don't not like sales. They don't like a certain way that they think you have to sell. And actually, if you can shift that to something that is about serving someone else and about how you communicate that with them, and you think about the whole journey for someone in a different way. For me, it really was quite mind-blowing. I thought we had enough traction with the business that I thought I knew how to sell. And then to be able to learn of like, oh, wow, no, it's actually quite lucky that we've sold anything, to be honest. Now I think about it, it must, because now it happens way more organically in a way that it feels nicer for everybody, basically. So that's why when I'd worked with him, I was just telling every business person who said they were struggling with sales, I'm like, talk to Ben, talk to Ben, talk to Ben, because there's a secret sauce that we don't know about that actually will change your perception of sales and you will sell more. Do you mean? So I actually think people just don't like a concept of selling that they have in their head, not actually what good selling is.
In my perspective and experience, I think what people don't like about sales is not the selling itself, but the rejection. And right, is almost similar, like why women, and the reason why I said it happens to women more often is because, again, there is a cultural and societal pressure for women to be the one that people propose to. We don't propose for marriage.
Interesting.
Example, and we don't even ask men out on a date. And it's not, at the beginning, it's not because we fear of rejection, but one, we're not even supposed to be the one asking for it. And imagine the double embarrassment when we get rejection.
Interesting. I never thought of it like that.
So that's why I keep encouraging women, and I think I'm on the same page with your co-founder Ben, because when you have when you're selling an anti-dandruff shampoo, you're actually helping people with dandruff, right?
Interesting.
So it's the act of helping, like, hey, in case you have an itchy scalp, here's a nice product.
Exactly.
So I think
that's exactly it.
So even when you have a cupcake business and what have you, it's like, well, I have a cupcake business. If your kids are having a birthday soon, they can have a cupcake birthday. Like, this is what I do, and I do it great. And if you happen to have needs, I can serve you that way.
Exactly that.
And it's very different, right? To like, knocking on doors saying like, oi, I have a cupcake. Here it is.
Exactly that. That's exactly it. And I think a lot of what we focus on actually is about starting conversations, and all of that is, are you experiencing this challenge? We've actually helped other people sort that out by doing this. Do you want to have a chat? And if people are like, oh yeah, okay, that is my challenge, and if you can help me with it, I don't even care what the thing is, let's have a conversation. And again, I still get all the cold emails and LinkedIn messages where someone's like, this is our company and we've been doing this for this many years, and can we do it for you? And you're like, you haven't even connected with if it's a challenge I've got. And
Yeah.
no one's going to say yes to that. Like, unless you've literally got no network and it's the first email and you're like, oh, I actually do need a marketing company. And you're the first person who's got my email, you might. But if you really on
Like,
scale
yeah,
want
but
to connect with people,
it's like,
it's understanding.
yeah, it's 1 in a billion that happens.
Yeah,
Because
exactly. Yeah.
here's the thing, even like things like appliances, people that you don't even need to discuss whether or not you need a washing machine. Okay? But
Yeah.
what happens when your washing machine suddenly is broken? You ask your friends like, what's your washing machine? Are you
Yeah.
happy with that?
Yeah. Yeah.
You ask around, right? So I don't
Mm,
why in this day and age people still shoving you their product and services on
yeah.
a
Yeah.
cold DM, and even like I appreciate people trying to sell in a smoother way, like go on a first date, second
Yeah.
date,
Yeah.
or you ask for
Yeah.
my hand in marriage, you know?
Exactly.
Uh,
Exactly.
or like at least study first. If you're selling a cupcake, at least get to know me whether or not I'm allergic to your ingredients,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
if I'm
Exactly.
diabetic, if it's kosher for me to eat, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
things like that.
That's exactly it. And I think that's that it's I think the same world you probably get in marketing, where some people just don't understand that psychologically people need to trust you and know you and like you before they're going to ever buy from you. And if you don't invest time and effort into that, then it doesn't matter how good your product is or your service, they're not going to find you, and that they're not going to choose you. Do you know what I mean? Like that is
Yeah.
the power of all of this, is laying the
Mm,
land for the long term. And I think
mm,
too many people invest or want to invest, particularly in sales and marketing, when things are going really crap and they're trying to make a short, quick fix. And you're like,
mm.
business isn't a short, quick fix thing. And that, again, that's probably a lot of social media being like, quickly change everything and get all the money. And you're like, no, this
No.
is like, you have to be strategic, you really thought out, you have to be patient and invest the time
Mm,
to build all these things to see it evolve over time, you know. And I think from my experience, those two things, marketing and sales, is normally the areas a lot of businesses don't invest enough in,
yeah.
and normally
And I
get caught
wonder
out
why.
because they
I
haven't.
honestly, what's your experience been? I mean, so you've seen your customer base, and so you would know the objections that a
Yes.
potential customer throw at
Yeah.
you. That's what fails my logic. You need sales and marketing to actually gain revenue, but you are not investing in it. What's wrong with this picture?
I
So
think
yeah,
the
what's
key thing I've discovered,
yeah.
yeah, is people don't know what they don't know. You and I can sit here because we've gone through the experience, we've got the expertise, we've got the understanding, we've got the whole picture, right?
Yeah,
Most people have got this picture
right.
and they don't know the opportunity that we can see for them. So for us, it's like, that's where the frustration with selling normally comes, because you
Mhm.
know your thing so well and you know that it's going to be of value to them, but you're talking to people who are having a completely different
Yeah.
conversation. So that's why the piece of understanding, who are you talking to, meet them where they are and have the conversation
Mhm.
with what they're experiencing, which normally is challenges. They don't know
Yeah,
what the solution is, but
yeah.
they definitely are experiencing challenges. So you can say, look, if you started this business a year ago and it's not where you want to be and you're really frustrated because you're giving all your energy into it,
Yeah.
but things just aren't shifting, you're just not
Working.
getting enough, like, and they're like, yeah, look, let's have a conversation, I want to see if we can explore something. Then you're going
Yeah.
to try do the education piece
Mhm.
normally, and help them discover, if they invest in something, what benefit they might get from it. But
Mhm.
that, you have to really meet people and business owners, particularly where they're at,
Yeah.
and accept that you've got all the knowledge. So for you, it makes a lot of sense, but you've got to bring them on that journey as well.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's why it's so funny when people know how powerful social media is. Social media get stupid people elected, for example. Right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, they don't invest in similar platforms that get again, the unlikely candidates to elected office, meaning they know that the machine itself is powerful, but they don't have they cannot connect the dot that actually the same machine can be as powerful for my business, and I better get working on that. So I guess my last couple of questions for you is, how does Second Voice Pro help, let's say, someone who's only been in a business for a year, they don't have a lot of capital, or maybe they're even pre-revenue, and then they see Second Voice Pro and they see, oh my God, these people, they know what they're talking about, but I don't even know if I can afford them. So what would you say to these people?
Well, interestingly, I'd say we're probably a bit too early for you in your journey because where we pack a punch is with organizations that have a little bit of traction, or they've got something to invest into getting to building it out. So one, we've got a whole load of resources that we're constantly creating and giving out on our article or on LinkedIn. So and Ben's great at this. Just share as much as you can, help people in that sort of way. We have then two different offers. So one is a kind of lighter touch entry. So for organizations who are going, okay, let's invest a little bit behind this and let's test it out for a couple of months. We can help you kind of get started, particularly with email and LinkedIn, of like, okay, let's understand how you create messaging that's actually going to breach conversations. A lot of the time our clients then are, signposting to a webinar they're doing or something and building that audience, those steps to the sell. And then we then work with those clients once they've got the revenues coming through that they can actually invest in a sales rep themselves. So we then have other organizations who have got a sales rep who then have the opportunity to research more, personalize more, pick up the phone, create videos, because you then kind of know what the strategy is going to be and you can just amp it up a little bit as well. So we aren't the kind of organization for people who are not ready to invest and are too early in their journey. We can't help you validate, but if you've got enough validation and you're now ready to refine your strategy, like I said before, we had traction with GBC, but what Ben did was came up and turned the dial a bit and shifted things. So we're able to just increase that already. So that's how we work best, right? We can't help you kind of figure out who your customer is and get all that pricing and stuff ready. But if you've got enough validation, we can take it to the next level and then again to the next level as well. And actually a lot of our clients who have got a sales rep that we basically house here, manage the campaigns. The idea is that they can also then, offer that individual a job in their company as they grow, and we'll just be the pipeline to help them grow their sales team. So that's kind of why we exist, is to help people build their first sales function so that they can then take it in-house and do it better. Do you know what I mean? So we are the stepping stone, but I would say if you're way too early and you haven't got money to invest in sales and you're still validating, go read a whole bunch of resources. We'll do a lot of webinars and stuff like that. But we're for the organizations a little bit further down in their journey.
Perfect. That is a lovely end to our conversation about Second Voice Pro. So now we talk about, oh my God, from mental health to to PMS to how best position yourself in a market and how to scale up your revenue. I'm always in awe with entrepreneurs and how they see life and see society. So my last question to you is, when I'm king, so what is your utopian kingdom for Sara Osterholzer?
It's funny. There's only one pet peeve I have, so immediately what comes to mind is I'd really like the UK to teach everyone how to drive properly on the motorway. That's my Germanism, which is the only thing if I could really go and shift something, I'm like, I wish they would do that. But no, all jokes aside, like I said, the key thing for me, I really see an opportunity with, particularly with business, is stepping up to the plate and going, we don't exist on this planet in isolation. There are people either that we're employing that are literally in our communities. We're on a planet, like, taking responsibility for that. Like, I really have seen a huge shift even in the last couple of years. But that would be so powerful if all businesses actually did something about that, like looked after people better, gave back, contributed to their community, and actually made decisions that weren't going to negatively impact the planet that we're on. I think that rather than just leaving it to government to try to figure it out, like, I think if businesses stood into a more of a powerful role there, we could really have a huge impact. So that for me is always what I've been trying to build into and see how we can support other businesses on that journey too.
Oh, beautiful. So, listeners, that's it for now. And in the next episodes, you can expect guests coming in from all sorts of female representation. So, thank you again, Sara. With that, I wish
Thank you so much, Rebecca, for having me.
Yes. So, if you want more sisters to listen to this, please share and review this podcast. It will mean a lot to me and the team at Upgrading Women. So, thank you and see you in the next episode.
Yay.